Welcome. You're listening to Entertainment U, and that's U period, like university. And this is brought to you by Society Bites Network and Radio broadcasting around the world, and also the Sarasota County Film and Entertainment Office. I'm Jeannie Corcoran, your friendly neighborhood film commissioner, and it's my pleasure today to have a very favorite celebrity that I know, Mr. Bob Layton. He is truly one of the entertainment industry's visionaries. He has done so much, creator, writer, artist, designer, entrepreneur, and in the field of comic books and movies and television, so much more. But I'm going to let you hear from Bob himself because he's much more interesting than I am. Welcome, Bob Layton.
Hi, Jeannie. You left out Snappy Dresser.
That is Snappy Dresser, yes. And quick-witted individual with a great sense of humor.
Oh, well, we've known each other for quite a while now. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Jeannie.
It is, and I always count you as one of the true celebrities in my personal circle of friends, and I appreciate that so much, especially your time. You travel all over the world, and here you are talking to us in Sarasota County, Florida.
Well, you caught me on a good week. I happened to be home, Yeah. I didn't want to miss Father's Day with my family, and but I've been all over the place. I've been in something like 17 cities in the last 6 weeks.
Wow! Now you do a lot of Comic-Cons, a lot of public speaking. What have you been doing these 16 weeks?
Well, I started out my trip in Dubai.
Wow!
Working with my financiers and investor partners there for my film company, and then I came back from there. I was there for 2 weeks. And I also did the Middle East Film and Comic Convention there, which is huge. You wouldn't think about Dubai as being a pop culture center, but boy, they had 70,000 people there. It was amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it was it was great fun. But I came back here just in time for the summer convention circuit, so I wound up bouncing all over the place, from Niagara Falls to Detroit to you name it, Houston, Texas, everywhere. So we're just about wrapped up with that now.
Wow. Thinking of all the science fiction storylines and comic characters and so forth you've created, you just need a teleporter, that's all.
Well, since Avengers Endgame was such a huge hit, and I had 3 characters that I'm known for in that movie, it has definitely made me more in demand this year.
Well, speaking of Avengers and speaking of your comic book and your comic books grown into movies credentials, which are so vast. I mean, I hope you don't mind me saying this, you've got credits for 6,400 plus comic book credits.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's amazing, and you are rivaled only by the late Stan Lee himself. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's what they say statistically. So that it's like that's insane when I think about it. But you got to remember, a lot of that time was spent as editor at Valiant. So every Valiant book had my name on it. So I guess that counts.
It does. It does.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's like when you're tipping close to 7,000 credits for in one particular industry. That's kind of, it boggled my mind. But a friend of mine actually did the research recently and found that on a database, and I'm just like, I was stunned.
Well, sometimes you're so busy doing it, right? You're so busy earning those credits, you're not even counting them. So. Yeah.
Well, that's crazy because I haven't worked in comics. I mean, I still do covers from time to time, but generally I haven't worked in comics in the last 10 years. That was from the first 30 years of my career.
Right. Tell me, Bob, speaking of comic books, you're the man who resurrected Iron Man. If it hadn't been for you, Iron Man was on the scrap heap. Tell me how that happened, if you can.
Well, it's one of those lightning in a bottle stories, Jeannie. I in my early days of being a freelancer and trying to break into the industry, the comic industry was very small back then. I think the entire industry only published about 35 titles.
Wow.
So in order for you to get work, you literally had to wait for someone to die. It's almost like finding an apartment in New York. It's the same thing. So most of us worked as apprentices to established artists doing background art or whatever, and we kind of waited our turn. It just so happened, because back then everything was distributed on the newsstands, they signed like an annual contract for 12 issues of the Avengers or 12 issues of Superman, blah 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 blah, and it was distributed, on newsstands and drugstores and stuff like that. There were no comic shops or any kind of thing like that, or direct market. So what companies would do when they got their returns back, it usually took about 6 months for them to get returns back, and they saw that a book was not doing well, they would move their A-list guys off and put B-list guys or schmucks like me on there as a tryout, because they figure we can't hurt the book. They're going to cancel it anyway, and it gives us a chance to actually, it's like in football where you're on the second team and you get a chance to go out there and play because the season's over, so they send you out there to play and get some experience, right?
I've never heard that perspective on it, but I totally get it. You really make it simple to understand.
Well, it's very much like that. This is in the mid-'70s, right? So, which really dates me, doesn't it? Well,
you were like 11, I think, at the time. 11.
The business is very different now. But so what happened was, I was working at DC at the time, and I came over to Marvel, and they offered me 3 books that were slated for cancellation. And Iron Man had always been one of those things I was passionate about. And the book was failing. The book had never really been terribly successful. And I think it's because it was really never thought out. I mean, Stan Lee came up with the concept, but he gave it to his brother Larry to write, and Larry was no Stan Lee, okay? Mm-hmm. Let's just put it that way. And so the book kind of floundered for years there. So I got the book with 6 issues left to do, and I asked them, I said, could I please change a few things? Because when I was a kid, I always thought, gee, the whole direction of this book is wrong. No kid really fantasizes about being Iron Man. They'd rather be Tony Stark. That seems like an achievable goal. So why isn't this guy a rock star? Why doesn't he walk into a room and like people drop everything,
Right.
And so I just brought my own sensibilities and my perceptions to the character. Also, he never really looked like armor. And, it always bugged me that he kind of had, they drew it like a costume almost. So was the first guy to really make it look like metal. And I created this rock star Tony Stark persona and changed the whole premise of the thing, introduced Rhodey and Justin Hammer and all these characters. And the next thing you know, 6 months later, it's one of their top 10 selling books.
There you go.
And the rest is history.
And it just goes to show, lots and lots and lots of people can have a similar idea. Like they have an idea for Iron Man, or Stan Lee has an idea for Iron Man. He gives it to his brother, falls flat. He gives it to Bob Layton, and ba-boom, suddenly Tony Stark has layers of personality and layers of character, and Iron Man has a whole new look. And the same idea in different heads doesn't work out the same way. So.
No, I mean, look at James Gunn and what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. The comic book was always an abysmal failure. The book had never succeeded. It was, there wasn't even, Marvel wasn't even publishing a Guardians of the Galaxy comic when they came up, when James Gunn reimagined it for the film industry, right?
Right.
And you look at what a monumental success that was. It was just because he had a different perspective on that group of characters. He brought his own sensibilities to it. So it's not really anything different.
Right. Well, and that's the beauty of it all. An artist sees it in their own unique mind, just as you saw Iron Man and many others. I mean, you have in partnership with others as well as on your own, you have reinvented or restyled or reinvigorated all kinds of characters. Ant-Man, Ant-Man and the Wasp. What was it? The Huntress. I mean, tell me some of those. I mean, they're really still alive and well.
Well, not only alive and well, but they're like on their way, Ant-Man obviously has become a movie franchise in its own right, and that's the crazy thing. I mean, originally when David Michelinie and I did it back in like 1978, it was just a 2-issue tryout to create a new version of Ant-Man, and we had the hook of making him a bachelor father. We thought that made him very different. I mean, every comic book character has their own hook. I mean, you look at Spider-Man. Spider-Man's hook is that he's a teenager. He's out there, pretending to be a grown man, but he's a teenager with teenage problems. And all the really good characters, the ones that we associate with emotionally, always have a hook.
Right.
You know, and Tony Stark, it was, you know, he was the modern day King Arthur, and the Avengers were his Knights of the Round Table, and he was a tortured king with this empire, Stark Industries, that he lorded over and had to protect his interests and so forth and so on. He wasn't a crime fighter in the true sense. So with Scott Lang, it was the idea of doing a bachelor father, something that had really never been approached in comics before, and that was kind of the hook with him.
And it was charming in the film, just charming.
Oh,
his
yeah.
little girl and stepfather and
his relationship with Cassie is wonderful. They did it so well. And in the second movie, they used one of my Iron Man villains, the Ghost, as the bad guy in that. Although they did give him a gender change through the lovely hand of John Kamen, who did a fantastic job. And so yeah, I mean, back in my early days at DC, Paul Levitz and I co-created the Huntress, who's going to appear in Birds of Prey, with the movies being shot right now with Mary Elizabeth Winstead playing that role, which I'm very excited about. And in October, I was over in South Africa because the first Valiant movie is based on a character I created, was being shot with Vin Diesel, called BLOODSHOT.
That's right. That's right.
And BLOODSHOT premieres in February 2020. So I got a lot of irons in the fire, as they say, Jeannie.
You certainly do, and they're all just red hot. That is
but these are things I did in the past, you know, and I'm very much focused right now on the future.
Sure. Well, and you also have, another Valiant creation that you were involved in, Dr. Mirage. Are we allowed to talk about that, or is that still...
No, I don't know much about it yet, other than I know that it's in development at CW, I think for next fall or whatever.
Right.
But that was when I left Marvel in the late 80s and founded Valiant. My job there was to basically create new IP. So, you know, there was Exo Man of War and Ninjak and Shadow Man and Harbinger, and of course there's Bloodshot.
Right.
So Dr. Mirage was one of those later ones that I did during my tenure there. So I'm very excited about that. I don't know much about it, though, other than... that again is another character that I created that's gone on to film or television, you know. So
your children have gone out into the world and they're growing up. It's lovely.
No, but it's really wonderful that a larger audience gets to see the stuff that I've been so passionate about in my whole life. You know, right. I mean, let's face it, the film and television is such a huge market and has become the entry point for this genre now.
Absolutely.
More than comics. So it has replaced comics as the entry point for the genre. So I'm very, very excited about that. And it doesn't hurt my credibility when I go on my hands and knees begging for money to make my own projects that Hollywood has gone to great lengths to make all these things based on IP I helped create.
That's incredible. Now, you actually met Vin Diesel, isn't that right?
Oh, yeah, I was on the set. You know, we went over there. Kevin Van Hook, who was the writer on the series, and I went over there, and we spent about a week there in Cape Town on the set every day with him and Sam Huygen from
Outlander.
From Outlander, yes, and it was a wonderful experience. They gave us total access, and the crew and everybody was really amazing. And we had time to sit down with Vin in his private compound and talk to him. He and I. We had New York in common. Vin is a big New York acolyte. So I spent 20 years of my career in New York. So if you came from New York, you were in with Vin.
Yeah, your brother's on the concrete. That's
he automatically has an open door policy with anybody from New York.
Cool. Of course, everybody out there now that wants to meet Vin Diesel are going to claim to be from New York. So.
Well, I'm telling you, it's a good idea. If you want to talk to the Vin Man, that's probably a good idea.
I understand he's really a smart guy, that he's really very savvy financially. He's really kind of a financial whiz about the work that he does, and yet people don't realize that about him.
Well, I have to say that my contact to him was peripheral because obviously he was busy making the movie.
Sure.
I actually spent more time with Sam than I did with Vin, but